So Skyframe basically stands for a view, not a window, and that we're pretty proud on being the world's leading manufacturer of frameless sliding doors. And the idea behind the entire concept is with this very narrow sidelines and this frameless product to bring more of the outside inside in this very nice living spaces that we're usually integrating.
Gotcha.
We produce and develop products back in Switzerland. That's probably another interesting point that we should mention here.
In Switzerland?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, and that's something I think we're going to have to talk about more for sure. And it looks like maybe in your background there's some Skyframe doors happening.
That is true, yeah. That's basically our courtyard in our headquarters here in Switzerland.
Give us some background also, so when the company was founded, and I guess maybe the story of why or how it was founded.
Skyframe was founded in 1993. Back then, as a very traditional metal workshop, we did this more artisan products like balustrades and staircases and all that. And then in 2002, that was the year when we first invented the frameless sliding door. And ever since, we grew with that part of our business.
Interesting. I didn't know that it had started off as a kind of a metal workshop, is what you said?
That is correct. Yeah, it was a very typical way for a small Swiss company, which was very much focused on this artisan products and whatever you need for your house in terms of metal work. Skyframe was founded by Beat Kuhl. He is the owner and still is the owner and runs the company as its CEO today.
Gotcha. And I'm assuming he's Swiss?
Yeah, I think the name, Sarah, it's a pretty Swiss name, Beat, which you will probably read as Beat. So it's a good name for the way of company that we are.
But so it's interesting. So the frameless windows came out, you say, in 2002?
Yes, that is correct.
Wow. You would think that in 2002, that would be maybe more common, but I'm sure it was kind of a groundbreaking, kind of product at that time, right? Because it seems like nowadays for architects, sort of those windows are fairly common, but it seems like there is a lot of technology and design that kind of goes into making them with smaller profile than maybe people would think.
It is very true, and it was actually a rocky way to today. When we first started with that kind of product here in Switzerland, we spent a lot of time in basically. On one hand, I would like to say educating architects, but probably much more to convince them that they can trust this kind of product. Because the question always was in the early years of Skyframe, how can a product that has so narrow sidelines, that is so slim, how can such a product have the same performance? And how can we live up to this Swiss requirements where temperatures and all that is required? And so in the beginning, it was pretty tough to get a point that we are today.
I'm curious, were people more concerned with the energy performance, or was it a structural concern? Or both?
I think it's fair to say, yeah, I just want to say it's probably both, actually. So it's the performance of the window on one hand, but then the integration of such a product on the other hand. We don't have the same kind of tolerances like conventional windows have and sliding doors, and we do also not allow kind of the same tolerance that comes to deflection, all that. So there are all these different points that we had to address and where we had to kind of convince that the architects that we thought about it, that we have solutions for it, and that they just should give it a try.
It's interesting because I feel like a lot of the work that we do, architects, it really depends on what products are available out there, right?
Yeah.
Like we could design the coolest thing on the computer, but if there is no one making those products the way we're envisioning them, then that's kind of limiting our design in some ways. So it's interesting that you say you had to convince architects to trust you basically with the product to use it.
It's probably to do with the Swiss mentality. We're slightly more conservative over here, and it's first and foremost that something has to work. So design is always very important. And yes, indeed, we were able to respond to a demand, but still there had to be some kind of education and taking kind of fear away from such a product as ours.
Yeah.
So, talking about the different types of products, and obviously behind you we see it, or we see through it. There's not much to see, which is the point, I suppose. But what's interesting is that you guys offer, there's the sliding windows or sliding doors, but there's also different types. There's ones that are fixed, obviously. I think you have pivot, and there's ones that are work with an angle, and then you have curved glass, which is
insane.
Which anyone who knows anything about glass is very, very super difficult to do. So can you talk about just kind of the different products and maybe some of the challenges with them or their uniqueness?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to start by saying, we, as Angelo already said, we specialize in the frameless systems. This could be a frameless fixed window, standalone fixed window, or you can integrate it into a window wall using our SkyFrame inline system. Our sort of specialty is a sliding door and windows. It could be either or. We also recently, I believe you already mentioned that we just introduced our pivot door. It's our manual pivot door, and Angelo will go into the movement we made on that product. But on the curved side, yes, that's a very unique way to put the glass together. They basically come up with, how do I want to say, like a steel shape to form the glass. They kind of use it to bend it, and it's a beautiful thing. So, with bending the glass, there are some challenges. You could sometimes get some waves looking at the glass, but for the most part, it looks fantastic. It's little by little, it's growing into one of our popular items or products.
And you guys can make any kind of radius to this curved glass, or is it kind of like a different kind of like standard curve that you offer?
Actually, we know that our clients do not like the answer no to the question, especially can we kind of push the envelope any further. We used to say that the maximum radius was 8 meters, but we were able to reduce that by a lot in the meanwhile. So it's pretty crazy what kind of radius we can achieve. I think one thing has to be mentioned here, or to be emphasized. We're talking about a frameless sliding door that is curved. So not just a curved fixed panel, you can really slide that. And with that, of course, we have to respond to these challenges with the bent profiles as well as the bent glass. But we're trying to push the envelope even further.
It's one of those things that I think if you're an architect, unless you've seen a product that exists that does that, you would think about it and you say, probably can't do that. You'd almost dismiss it because it's a very kind of unique thing to do. Because I would imagine from the manufacturing side, the tolerances don't change whether or not it's curved or it's I guess straight or flat. And it would make the process much more challenging to produce that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. When it's all said and done and the system's in, it looks fantastic. It gives a big boost in the architectural aspect of each facility. You're trying to get away from sharp corners. You're trying to get away from lines. That bended glass really takes it to the next level.
And when it comes to the production process, that's, as you mentioned, is indeed pretty tricky. You said that the tolerance is probably not gonna that they're gonna be the same. It's actually even more difficult with curved sliders. Why is that? Because every glass panel that is used for the SkyFrame arc, as we call it, is basically bent for or to this very specific project. So every glass panel is unique. But that's just one side. The other side is that you have to have the frame, right? That has to be bent and curved as well. And the challenge is that you have this frame, all the millings, the extrusions, but as well as the powder coating has an impact on the radius of the profile. So heat obviously is gonna affect the radius again when you powder coat it, and all that has to be calculated when you work on a project specific installation, and that's a further challenge. And as you can imagine, once the glass arrives, it has to fit perfectly into this frame, and we hope that it does. And we're pretty proud that in the meanwhile we can say that we figured that out. And as Richard already mentioned, it's getting more and more popular now. This curved sliding doors.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I see architects complain all the time that drawing curves is difficult, but you don't have to make the
I
products.
didn't know that.
What I was going to ask, so most of your products are, I'm assuming, are used on residential project.
90% of what we do here in Los Angeles is on the high-end residential side. We do more some commercial, but for the most part, you're going to see us in the residential area. The Malibus of the world, the Beverly Hills of the world. If you have a view of a mountain, of a beach, of the water, that's going to be our territory. That's where we come in.
On the other hand, that's always a little bit fascinating to me. One of our biggest market is actually London, and you don't see any mountains nor a beach, nor a lot of nice parks there. But clients there in this very traditional, homes, they use Skyframe in their extensions to the backyard to, really bring the light and the nature into their homes, because there is not plenty of nature and light around them because of this very narrow house. And that's very interesting that this is such a popular product there as well.
Oh, so you're talking about in a obviously in London, but in an urban environment where it's historic, so the building fronts are maintained as to what they originally were or close to that, but they have the ability in terms of the architecture and probably the regulations to blow out the back to do something very contemporary.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, this very this traditional London townhouses, as we would probably know them from San Francisco and some parts of New York City as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say San Francisco certainly has that. They're super strict. Can't do anything in San Francisco, except for in the back sometimes.
If the neighbors are okay.
Yeah, if the neighbors approve it. Yeah, otherwise no. Are there certain things that architects should be mindful of when they're thinking of using your type of product or your product in particular?
I think the biggest part is the preparation, getting us involved at the right time in the early phases. Up top, we have a built-in 3/4 of an inch gap there, and it's mostly there for deflection. We have a 1/2 inch on each side for the jams, and we have another 1/2 inch of play at the bottom. So it's important to get us in at the right time in the early phases. The houses do deflect, commercial buildings do deflect. They do sag down. So it's important we tell them exactly what to do and work with them through it, because it's not always easy. So yeah, getting us in early, getting them to our showroom, making them understand where we're coming from and the quality that they're getting really helps in the long run.
Is there a particular phase where it's best for you guys to come in?
I would just say as early as possible. As soon as as soon as we receive the bid, we try to get together right away, whether it's virtually or in person, just to describe and explain our system. We got a lot of little things. We have the sliding window system. You don't see all the moving parts. That's the beauty of the Skyframe. So we want to make sure that they understand how to prepare for that, and to maximize the product that they're purchasing.
Yeah, I think what you said also highlights a larger issue of the difference generally between more contemporary types of houses or buildings versus traditional ones. And this is something we talk about with other architects and contractors for sure. They're very different types of buildings to build. And when you do a contemporary home, like the structures that you're both sitting in front of, or contemporary building, there has to be a lot more planning from the very beginning, because everything's hidden, everything's buried, and if that planning doesn't take place, it doesn't work out. And I think one of the mistakes that could be made if an architect has not done that type of building before is not, or in the builder as well, is not appreciating or understanding that kind of planning has to happen. You can't just order a Skyframe window and say, it's gonna work out in the end, or assume that all of these alignments are going to work out in a sleek house, because oftentimes it doesn't.
Correct. They can't have the attitude of, Skyframe will fix it, during the installation. We'll get it taken care of. A lot of, you have a lot of high-end finishes, and we want to protect those on every step.
I would like to add something to that, because that's one side, like the challenges in kind of integrating such a product in the construction and in the building sites. But the other thing is also the opportunity to design and to create something that probably hasn't existed before. I just 2 days ago, I returned from my last US trip, and I've been on a stunning project on Long Island. And on this project, we had like, sorry, I have to use the Myrick European system, but we had like it's 15 meters front of sloped skyframe sliders, okay, like on the second floor. And
it's like 45 feet of glass. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I met the architect. We had very nice lunch together, and he told me, you know what? When I first started with the design of the building, I had to drop the idea of this feature in the design. Because there was no such product that could kind of cater or respond to that design. And then he reached out to Skyframe, and even we told him, and that was almost 10 years ago now. We even told him, you don't know what? We don't feel comfortable with that. And then got back and we thought about it again, and then and it was still our owner actually who then made draw something, a design, and he reached out to the architect again and said, hey, you know what? We think we have an idea and we have a solution, and this is how it will look like. Would you like to continue? So it was long before, that the home was built, where the architect approached us and integrated us in the design process, and we could then figure a project-specific solution out with him, which is today one of our kind of standard products in our product range. So that's another reason to approach us as early as possible in the design stage.
Wait, so did the tilted panels, were they birthed out of that project?
Indeed, yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's a great story.
The owners are going to move in, I think, in about 6 weeks. So it took quite some time, not necessarily because of the windows, though, but just to explain how early we've been kind of part of this design process for the entire building.
You have to be careful. You're going to get a bunch of requests to do like some crazy windows.
Yeah, try us.
I mean, I don't know what else you can do. You guys kind of have it all. But that's I like that because, well, one, I'm actually very interested to see it's a house, you said?
Yes. Yeah. It's a very beautiful second home on Long Island.
Of course, it's a second home. I have to see the house when it comes out. But I think one of the aspects, one of the things for architects that can be very liberating or, on the other hand, frustrating is when you don't have good people you're working with. And it's not just about the immediate project stakeholders like the engineer and the contractor and the client, but it extends to folks like you guys. If we have a wacky idea or we're not sure about something, it makes a huge difference if we can call someone up from that company and have a conversation to see if there's something existing that you have that works, or something new, or whatever else. And frankly, and I'm sure you know this, and frankly, I think for a lot of architects and designers, we'll stop using people. Even if their product falls into the high quality category, we'll stop using them if they aren't good at working with us. It's not worth the time or the energy.
The beauty of our software, where we, after we start talking to the end user, the client, the architect, they tell us what they want, from finishes to the type of system. And we could get back to them really, really quick on whether it's feasible or not. If it's a basic application, a little bit out of tolerance, or if we have to dig deeper, like Angelo mentioned. So they get their answer pretty quick on what we can handle. They'll get the associated shop drawings, all the details from our libraries. So they know pretty quick, and they seem to levitate to that. Knowledge is power, and the quicker the better.
Yeah,
I'm sure you guys could understand that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then on the other hand, the one thing that one might need to know about Skyframe, when it comes to project-specific solutions, when it comes to unique new ideas, we very much like the idea on working on this kind of things. But then on the other hand, and that's probably the Swiss part of our DNA, we're also slightly conservative. So if we do not feel 100% comfortable that the solution that we develop for a project is not working for the next few decades, we would rather say no to that, or provide alternatives and options, how a problem or a a demand could be responded to as well. So this is very important. We know that sometimes just for the sake of a sale, people say yes to everything, and then it has to be figured out on the job site sometimes, and that's very frustrating for all the parties involved. So that is very important to know about Skyframe. We love to work on new solution, on project-specific solutions, but we're only gonna say yes to one of them if we feel 100% comfortable that you're gonna like that, and that it's gonna live up to the expectations that our clients, the architects, and we ourselves have.
That makes sense.
In regards to that.
Yeah, it makes sense, especially because you're not in the products you're producing are performative and they're exterior. And so like they've got to work, you're not producing a nice vase that sits somewhere. There's risks involved for sure. And the buildings have to be designed and built to last for quite some time. Which actually comes to another point, is the maintenance of the systems. Because one who's not familiar with the products might assume, well, these things require fairly tight tolerances. They look great, but the maintenance on this is going to be horrendous. How am I ever going to fix these things if something breaks? How does Skyframe address those issues?
So the ultimate goal, for Skyframe was obviously to put out the best product. And with that is maintenance, just like you mentioned. People think, once you have the finished product in, you can't maintenance those things because everything's hidden for the most part. That is not the case. If a motor goes out of belt, we could walk up to our systems, look up, and there's 4 screws to have access to the motor. If you want to replace it, if you need to test it, run a diagnostic, it's all right there. You don't have to break walls. You don't have to break floors. You're able to service, put it back, put the 4 screws back in, and you're done. It's something that, everybody loves, obviously, and it helps us move forward and get a resolution for a customer quickly. That's
interesting.
And one of the probably most exposed parts of our product, obviously, is the rollers, right? So each panel stands on 2 rollers on each side, and that's kind of the moving part of our system. You can't see them, obviously, but the system and this very crucial part of it are designed to be maintained in no time. And I actually like the fact that you asked that question about maintenance, because, most of clients would probably not think about this part of the product's life, right? When they make the decision to go for one or the other product, maintenance is probably not the first of their concerns. So nevertheless, it definitely makes sense to address that. And going back to these rollers, this is something that you can do in like 2 minutes. There's a tool for that. You lift glass and then you push it aside, and then you replace the rollers, you put the glass back down on it, and it works again. And this is very typical for design of Skyframe. We take a little bit longer to launch a new product to the market, but when a product is ready for the market, then you can think, and we like to believe that we thought of everything. And this is also part of kind of how we approach these things.
You're like the Apple, but of frameless windows.
Of course, I would never dare to compare us to Apple. We're not there yet.
Actually, you're better than Apple because you can do maintenance. On Apple products, you can't do any maintenance. You just got to trade the thing in.
I'm glad Angelo mentioned that part. When our products, for the most part, are purchased for a home, for a residential area, the last thing on their mind is maintenance after the fact. Yeah. So when it does become an issue or something needs to be looked at, then it comes to the forefront of their mind, but we have it covered. So it's an easy transition for them.
Actually, I just remembered that we were walking a job site with a contractor, a super expensive house, very expensive house, and they had Skyframe products. And so I had asked them, what are your thoughts on Skyframe objectively? And I do have to say that they were thrilled. And they said that the people who you have folks who help with the installation, which we have to get into, that they were great, but also they were really jazzed because of the maintenance, because for any of these really high-end homes, or any home really, there needs to be maintenance. And a lot of these contractors at the high-end scale, they have dedicated teams to doing maintenance of their houses. And you're both 100% correct. It's not obviously not the first thing clients think of, and often something that's not on their radar at all. And they don't realize that this is this house is a thing I have to upkeep. But anyway, the contractor who's at a very, very large company, they were both impressed and excited by this, because they were like, when we come back out, it's not going to be a pain in the butt, and the client's going to be happy because we can solve whatever problems or just do general maintenance with ease. So they don't get blamed for stuff.
Correct.
It's fair to say that this is also one thing that probably distinguishes Skyframe from some of the other products. With not saying that the other products are not good, but this is something that I would kind of encourage all clients to look closer at. How does the maintenance work? What in 5-10 years time, exposed at the beach to salt and sand and all that, how does that actually work, that system with that kind of exposure? And I think one thing that kind of is important to know in Europe in general, and in Switzerland in particular, you build homes for a lifetime. So the homes, they'll be there for 50, 100 years, some of them much longer. So they expect a product such as ours to be as long lasting, if that is the right word to use, as the homes. This is how Skyframe is designed, and how we design and how we manufacture this product. So it's always first and foremost about quality, and that you can maintain it and being happy as long as possible with this kind of product.
We were actually having this exact conversation yesterday with a contractor who's from England, and we were commenting on how buildings in Europe are, like you said, meant to last, when things here are a little bit more loose and they're more meant to be consumed than actually last.
That's a fair statement.
You know, and the maintenance is important because it's going to determine the lifespan of the product and therefore of the house, right? If something breaks, you can't change it. You have to rip everything out and build new, which in the long run, it's not a sustainable mentality to be doing that. So.
But as a European, you have to.
So I'm not biased to European products, but maybe it is time to kind of think a little bit differently.
And it's important too, if you think about any system, you get a call, you get an email asking a homeowner to come take a look, and we could tell based on what their diagnostic is on their message what to bring. So that's even better. We could go in, fix it in one shot, and move on and let the client be happy.
I did mention the kind of installation of the products. We talked earlier about architects bringing you guys on board soon and having conversations to account for tolerances and whatever else is on that list. But what about for the installation with builders and contractors? Are there specific things they should be mindful of? Do you guys have your own local team of people who come out and help with the installation? How does that work?
Yeah, so we outsource the installation when we do installations of our products, and we do have we have an installation trainer, and we have an installation manager. So they are there for everything, for support, to help any complications, and to go and do a final sign off with the client to make sure that they're happy. It's very key to what we do. To have someone be able to show up if there's an issue, if there's a concrete issue, if there's a rough opening issue, or if their installer just gets stuck and can't get past a certain point. So yes, to answer your question, we have 2 in-house that work for the Los Angeles team, and they deploy as necessary.
Are builders allowed to? I mean, I guess they could if they wanted to, but do you permit them to try and install the windows and doors on their own? Or is that something you say, don't do that? It's a no-no.
Correct. Yeah. We tell them not to, and to use a Skyframe certified installation team. I
think I would like to add to that. That counts for the US, but also for our worldwide operations. So, for example, in Los Angeles, we have the branch that is selling directly to architects, builders, clients, and that's where we do also supervise the installations with our own people, as Richard just mentioned. Then the rest of the United States, for example, is covered with a few distribution partners. And all of these distribution partners, they are certified. They get trained by Skyframe. They get the support from one of our installation trainers whenever they use a new product that they have never worked with, or if, again, there is some troubleshooting necessary on a job site. So we have people, they do nothing else the whole year than traveling around the world, being on the job sites together with our distribution partners, and kind of just to ensure that the product is installed perfectly. Because we're probably going to talk about this a little bit later, but we produce and manufacture the entire product here in Switzerland to ensure quality, but the best quality is useless if the installation is not going to be perfect. So this is why we put a lot of effort and capacities in training, in field support and all that. And this is why we're not aiming for just this quick growth, getting as many companies as possible to sell our product. We want to have distribution partners, companies that really buy in to the idea of highest quality standards and providing the right service and support to its clients. That's kind of the approach.
Yeah. I think the philosophy is very clear from that, actually.
I'm glad you said that, because I feel like we see that even as architects, where people think, oh, you just put expensive, finishes and it's going to look good. Well, if the installation is not done well, it's not going to look good. So I think it's as important as the product in itself is how it's been put in place.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Correct.
When the products come out to the site, and maybe we're kind of going backward and working our way toward how they're made, but are all the extrusions cut to the exact dimension and size, or do they come in longer lengths and are people cutting them on site? How does that work?
So there's no cutting on the job sites of our material. If there's an issue with anything on the site, we typically lean towards adjusting the rough openings. When the shipments come from Switzerland to the U.S., I'm only speaking for the U.S. at the moment. They do come in separate shipments. They come in glass. The glass comes, the profiles come. They all come separately. So to answer your question, yeah, they come separately, and they're installed in the field by our field team.
Is there a particular advantage in kind of shipping it in pieces rather than shipping the whole product assembled?
It's a good question. If I may, I would like to add something to your question, to the first question. It's actually a very good one, because while some of the other products, provides the extrusions to a local manufacturers in the US, where then all the millings and the cutting is done locally. Skyframe produces everything back in Switzerland. So we got all the informations and the measurements from our US team, and here downstairs in our factory, the profiles are going to be cut, all the millings are going to be done. The motors are going to be installed on the profile already. So that's all done here. And the only reason for that is quality, because we strongly believe if there is always the same crew doing the same production steps, they kind of get the best experience how to do it in a perfect way, and to ensure that the quality is always the same. It doesn't matter if it's going to be installed in Sydney, Australia, or in Los Angeles, USA, or Lake Constance here in Switzerland. So that's something that we have a slightly different approach than most of the other products out there. That is one thing. The other thing, to respond to your question, why do we not ship them as a whole in already pre-assembled product, is because, again, the nature of the product requires that you're gonna assemble the frames on the job site before you install the glass in it, because again, you don't have the tolerances. So this is part of the Skyframe design, that you can glaze it after you installed the frames and after waterproofing and all that.
Super interesting. So talking about how the products are made, or your facility, and actually also it being a Swiss company, which has come up a few times, I'm always intrigued with companies who have a strong identity associated with a place. Does that have an impact or mean something? Because there is the the kind of thought that, what's the expression? It works as like a Swiss watch would work, very fine, detailed, hyper performance.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And me being from the U.S., I think it's a big deal, for myself and for my clients. You guys have alluded to it already. Quality is everything. A lot of our clients here in the U.S. are European as well. So they understand what the Swiss culture is all about. They're focusing more on the quality, the engineering, to making sure you're getting the right application. Everything down to everything, just like you said, like a fine Swiss watch. We control the quality. It's a huge sum. You have the powder coating in-house, engineering, the motorization. It's all done in-house. And again, I'm beating a dead horse here. We're controlling the quality from top to bottom. It's very important, not for just myself and the clients, but it's a very good selling point when we do go in.
So then, are the extrusions themselves, getting to the nitty-gritty, are those made at the facility, or are those made by someone else and you cut them down to a specific length? The same question applies to glass, actually, too.
So the extrusion are been made by one of our suppliers. So we have very strong relationships with our suppliers. So we designed the profile and we get the extrusion from one of our suppliers in Germany. Actually, just like 2.5 hours from our headquarters and production. Same counts for glass. We get the IGUs from. We have 2 supplies for that and an additional supply for the curved glass. And then again, they are from Germany, very close to where we have our headquarters. And then we process it here at Skyframe. So we do all the millings, we apply all the sealings, we apply the motorization, everything that is needed so that it only has to be assembled on the job site by one of our installers or distribution partners.
It's interesting that you guys have powder coating in-house, and obviously it's for quality purposes, but I think that also highlights the level of precision required, because I think you mentioned earlier, maybe specifically with the curved profiles, that the powder coating, obviously it adds a layer of thickness, and that has to be, it must be accounted for.
Yeah, that is actually a very unusual approach that Skyframe had in the past 10, 15 years. So while many of the Swiss manufacturing companies kind of outsourced production steps, Skyframe did exactly the opposite. So we insourced know-how and production steps. And powder coating is one of them. So if you would see our powder coating plant downstairs, it is way too big for the volume that we had back in 2015 when we moved in. But it was a very conscious decision, because you said, and that's absolutely true, quality is one decisive factor in everything that we do at Skyframe. And then the other very important factor is efficiency. If you want to be competitive out in the world, that is very, very difficult, because Switzerland is a pretty expensive country to have a factory. Nevertheless, if you're efficient and the quality lives up to that standard too, that's when you're going to be interesting for the clients. And this is one reason why we insource and still insourcing competence and know-how.
I'm curious from your standpoint, from a company standpoint, how important is it that you have good relationships with the suppliers, the glass and the metal, and how difficult is it to find, or was it, I guess, to find makers who could produce things at the precision and quality that you guys, were demanding?
I can honestly say that Skyframe wouldn't be where we are at this point if it was not because of our suppliers. So we have very strong relationships, and to find these suppliers is a pretty difficult task because we have these factory standards, we have requirements, how a supplier has to provide the goods in what quality and all that. But once a supplier decided, yes, I can do it and I want to do it, that's usually the start of a very long and a strong relationship. And this is crucial. I can say, and the best example, was just last year and the year before that during the pandemic. It was only thanks to these very strong relationships that we had that Skyframe not at one point had any supply chain issues during the pandemic. So during the whole time, we were able to deliver our goods on the promised date. And this is, I think, a very strong sign that these relationships and this development that we do together with our suppliers is a very good thing to have. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's crazy to not have any delays during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
You might be the only company we know of who managed to do that.
Which actually could be one of the questions. We have a lot of architects and listeners kind of all around the globe, and they might be thinking, well, Skyframe products sounds great. They're based in Switzerland. How long is it going to take for me to get those products over to whichever country their project is in?
Yeah, lead times.
Like, are your lead time much longer, much faster? Are they kind of like comparable to other manufacturers?
So right now, I could speak to the lead times. To produce the actual product, it's somewhere into the 14 to 16 week range.
Mm-hmm.
That's included in our standard lead time. Frames, glass, powder coating, etc. Our standard form of shipment is sea freight. There's obviously an option to do an air freight as well. But standard, you're looking at a sea freight shipment, which takes an additional, call it 4 to 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, our contractors and our GCs, they're okay with that. They've prepared and they've done their research. But there are times where they need things faster, right? So what we can do is offer them the profiles to be shipped separately from the glass.
Okay.
So it's going to allow them to continue with their finishes. We could get our frame in, get our tracks down, and they could continue, and we could vary our system in little by little. So we could all just be on the same page to completion. Realistically, 14 to 16 weeks for production, 2 to 3 weeks for air freight if they do go that route. And then the glass will arrive more times than not exactly at the time that they need it to do the finish and buttoning up.
Yeah, and that's actually not too bad.
So it's really awesome that you could get the
expect.
frames in advance, like you say, so you don't, the site doesn't get put on hold because we're waiting for Windows. Like it's pretty practical.
Yeah, and you guys have worked for. We have a lot of pressure every day. Hurry up, get it here, hurry up and wait.
And then you're like, well, you should have started your project sooner.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite sayings is hurry up and wait. So, but we have multiple ways to accommodate the end user.
Nice.
But I'm not sure. I think that also kind of changed a little bit during the pandemic. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we kept being able to provide the goods on the promised date. And before the pandemic, it was indeed sometimes an issue or discussion, the lead time from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I think it helped a lot that we were being able to deliver on time. And I also heard when traveling the United States, talking to architects, to our distribution partners and so forth, that many of the local manufacturers kind of had very long lead times, much longer than our 24 weeks or 30 weeks, when depending on the shipment. And I think that's still something that is the case with some today. So that is, I think we get a little bit more appreciation nowadays with lead time, rather being on the date than being 1 week or 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I see a lot.
I think clients have been traumatized with lead time, especially for like kitchen appliances. So anything that's like around what you just mentioned sounds great.
Yeah, it's like when you want your fridge, it'll come up in
2 years.
In 2 years.
That's true, though.
I know, it's just kind of ridiculous. I'm also wondering, from a company standpoint, so the products, I assume, initially were released in Europe, and then the U.S. and North America happened later. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah.
Was it really difficult to break into the U.S. market, to say, hey, we're a Swiss company, check out this new... Because there must have been competitors in the United States. I mean, obviously.
Yeah. Let me start with Switzerland or with Europe. Again, back in 2002, there was no such product with frameless sliding door with the performance, thermal performance, but also water and all that. So for about 4 years, we have only worked in Switzerland, Austria, and Germany. That had two reasons. One was really to build up this market in general, and then the other thing, the first English-speaking person joined Skype in 2006. So that's when we started to internationalize in English-speaking markets, and that helped a lot with all the experience that we got from working, start working in English-speaking countries. Australia was the first after UK, and with that we learned how to open new markets and how to explain the story and why people should and could work with this kind of product. Now, when it comes to the United States, our official entry was in 2014. That's when we started to work within the United States with our own branch, with distribution partners and so forth. Nevertheless, we had a few European clients that wanted that built their second homes in the United States, and they wanted to have the product. So we had some kind of tryouts first. Nevertheless, other than in Switzerland, we haven't been the first product here, in the first frameless sliding door in the US. So we had to convince and to show these clients, these architects, where the differences are, what our approach is, why it does make sense to have to install a product that has been produced in Switzerland, being shipped over to the United States. And that is, it took us quite a few years to really build up this trust and the brand. And the United States is definitely a different market. what we do.
Actually, on that, so what are some of the differences? I'm very curious.
Let me start with, we Swiss sometimes think that we need to educate people to our standards of quality and to everything that we do, precision and planning and so forth. And we had to learn that we cannot change how things are being done here in the United States. that is just generally speaking.
Sure.
But then the way of construction is completely different.
Yeah.
As I said, in Europe, you build a house for decades. Everything is of concrete and brick. There's not a lot of wood or timber. And as you know, probably a part of Florida, that's quite different here in the United States. I learned that there is a job that is called framer, and I didn't know what that was until I saw it.
That's super interesting. Yeah. There's a lot of Type 5 wood framing, stick construction, especially on the West Coast.
Steel and timber, that's one big difference to Switzerland. That comes with its own challenges. Then again, precision and tolerances. Sometimes, especially clients who works with our product or with this kind of product for the first time, they tend to underestimate the tolerances. We don't tell people, hey, watch out, because we want to be lazy or whatever, or just giving all the responsibility to them. It is because we know how important it is, and sometimes people tend to underestimate that. That's another difference. And then big is better. I mean, the the average project in Switzerland, for example, is contains 80 square meters of glass of Skyframe product. In the UK, based on the fact that I mentioned earlier, we're talking about like 20 to 30 square meters of glass as part of the home. In the United States, it's 200 and more on average. So that's very, very different than what we know from here.
That's funny. I mean, it is true. A lot of these houses, and obviously your product is a premium product. It's a very high-end product. But when you're operating in that space and you're doing houses in that space, they tend to be very, very, very large, for sure. I mean, they borderline
it's a big
commercial
country.
Buildings. Oh, it's a big country?
Yeah, there is room, you know.
True. That's true. There's true, I suppose.
But I'm curious. So when you tapped into the American market, let's say, did you have to kind of rework some of the detailing of the profile and the windows to make it work with the wall assemblies that are used here versus the ones that are used in Europe, or that didn't really need to change?
Absolutely. No, we had to change quite a lot actually. So we use a completely different bottom profile here in the United States that has to do with the seal pen that is kind of just the way how the waterproofing and everything is being done with windows here. So that's different. But then of course we had to get a hurricane certified product for the Florida market as well. We had to develop one completely new product, which is the pivot door that we never used in Europe, which was not popular to this until we kind of developed it. We had to develop quite a few new products, or we had to adjust our classic products to the American market.
And then talking about the pivot door, which is a relatively new thing, is that right?
Yeah, pretty new still.
Were there particular challenges to that one? Because all their systems previously were, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't pivot or rotate. They were purely sliders.
Yeah.
The pivot door, the challenges with the pivot door, you need to know that, again, pivot door in Europe was not very popular. Not many countries that we would use this kind of door. And nevertheless, we learned when we had to quote for almost all Californian projects, at least there was at least one pivot door in the scope. So we wanted to be able to respond to that and invented developed the pivot door. And the main concern that we had is that there is not one product out there that has a pivot point that could absorb the weight for decades of the glass, because usually pivot doors, they like to go higher and higher. There's sometimes a ton of glass that you would kind of need to absorb. And there was no pivot point on the world that could kind of last for decades. So we looked into so many products and prototypes until we decided we're going to develop our own pivot point. We want that door to operate perfectly in 50 years time with a ton of glass that has to be kind of moved. That was the main challenge when we developed the pivot door, and we're very proud on the result. We haven't been the first supplier of pivot doors to the market, but I think that when it comes to longevity, it was worth to spend more time in this particular field.
You guys don't do skylights, do you?
We don't.
You should.
Not yet.
You should just do everything in the house, so we can just spec sky frame for everything and not have to mix things.
That's another one that needs a little bit of love and could use your expertise.
That's just a personal request. If you could just make it so all the fenestration could be sky frame, that'd be appreciated.
You noted. Thank you.
What is the maximum span of glass that you guys can do? Is it limited by the glass itself? Is it limited by the frames and the tracks?
So I could dive in a little bit into this. We've seen spans, go anywhere from 50 to 80, 70, 80 feet. I'm trying to understand the question a little bit. So you're saying, does the glass work seamlessly within those spans, or are they on the same track?
Oh, actually, that's even more detailed. I was just asking the dumb question of how big of a piece of glass can we have? and if the limitation is because of the glass manufacturing, or does it has to do with the track length, which, I could see your question also.
So the limitation first and foremost comes from the production and the manufacturing of the glass itself, of the glass panel. You, as you know, kind of glass is going to be made in this how would you call it?
Oven, kiln.
The oven on one hand and
tempered oven.
Yes, correct. And one side of a glass panel is limited with 3 meters and 20 centimeters. Please don't ask me how much that is in inches and feet. But so this is the maximum size that a glass producer can provide. But then on the other hand, the length the other side is limitless. So when it comes to sky frame, we could theoretically go up to 20 meters, but it very much depends on wind loads and of aesthetics. So this is more important But to give you an idea, we recently installed a 7 meter, which I think is close to 30 or 28 feet of a glass slider. So 7 meter high and 3 meter wide.
That's massive.
Wow.
That's a huge pane of glass.
On the larger openings, you have the tracks are spliced together around the 20 foot mark.
Okay.
And they just keep connecting from there. Yeah. So
Wow.
if you have something that's, call it 70, 80 feet wide, you'll probably have a total of about 4 frames there. And the jams are usually within that height as well, about 20 feet high.
I mean, 20 feet
is usually the max.
And what's the cross section like of the extrusion? Just approximately, like how big are the extrusions in their cross section?
Are you talking about the depth of the tracks?
Yeah, like how deep and wide they are, the profile.
So from the interior to the exterior, you have about 4.5 inches of depth in total, which will cover about 2 tracks with that 4.5 inches. Then you could go as high as 6 tracks, I believe, and that is about 14 inches of depth.
And the height of the profile is it's not very tall, right? It's not like 8 inches. It's like a couple inches.
You mean, are we talking about the track?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think in inches, in centimeters. So the entire bottom profile in centimeters is up to between 10 and 14 centimeters. That's what we need for the bottom profile.
Yep. Gotcha. Yeah. And so what's interesting is that with the 20-foot extrusion, that's a super long extrusion for a profile that is that size. It is kind of what I'm thinking about. And maintaining it to be straight and clean that entire distance is a long way. I think one thing that probably end users are thinking about is when you have seams in the track and they're sliding the doors or the windows, they're wondering, am I going to feel a bump every time I go over that seam,
Yeah, it's actually a seamless seam, quote unquote. We have roller tracks; they snap on, so that covers all the seams that you have. So the door is actually, rolling on a continuous smooth track, comparable to call it a dome track.
And you guys also have motorized systems, is that right?
Yes.
Maybe talk about that a little bit, and some of how it works. I mean, does it hook up to like a smart home system? Does it hook up to a phone? What happens if the motor fails? Can I still get out of my house?
Yeah, I could dive into that a little bit. So yeah, our system, obviously it has its own motor that comes with its own software. We provide, I think what you guys might be familiar with is a dead man switch to enhance the safety of it. Our system has a smart motor, so it can integrate with all the home automation systems out there. There are quite a few. Mm-hmm. So you can adjust the speeds of it. You can make it a telescoping opening to where all panels open at the same time. Flexibility boils down to the home automation system. You have the bigger homes and you have the smaller homes. It depends on how much they want to integrate into that automation. You could have a microwave running from it, a door, a window, a refrigerator, an alarm system, whatever you want to call it. But our system will work good if it's used as intended, if it's not on the same panel as a bunch of other things, if that makes sense.
I think so. Yeah. Maybe you're talking about, well, one of the issues we've seen with smart homes, or when homes attempt to be smart, is that between the different systems and all the different components, especially in a large house, it gets very confusing. And I don't know, there's this kind of thought that some clients have, the smart home is going to make my life more convenient. I'm going to be like Tony Stark. Everything is going to be easy to use, but that's not always the case.
Our system works flawlessly as a standalone system in the under control home automation systems, right? It can work with other devices. Do not get me wrong. We have seen instances, or I've heard of instances where, they just overload it, and so if it has its dedicated home automation system, you're going to get a flawless operation.
Gotcha.
You asked another very important question, and that was, what if there is, for example, a power outage or a panic situation? How would that work? And our system, and that seems to be quite unique, can be always at any time being operated manually as well. So you can always push and open the slider manually, even though it's a motorized, if it's a motorized unit. That is, so if there is a power outage, you can still open the panel. If there's a panic situation where people probably wouldn't look for a switch or whatever, you can open it at the handle profile. And same obviously with closing, so it doesn't stand open if there is a power outage, and you can still close it. So that's something that seems to be very unique, and this is part of because the motor is designed, developed, and built by Skyframe, and is not a third-party product.
I see. That's pretty good. I mean, yeah, that's one of the concerns. If you can't get out, then that's not good.
I feel like these days, actually, security, being able to prevent people from getting in and allowing people to get out is something that's more and more of a concern among clients generally in the last like 5 to 10 years. I don't know why. I'm not going to speculate, but I think it's definitely much more in the front of people's minds.
Yeah, in short, the door is not dependent on the motor for locking and unlocking.
Gotcha.
And same counts for burglary protection, for example. I just recently learned, again, last week, that burglary protection, glass breaking sensors and all that just started to become more and more popular in the United States. Well, this is a big concern in Europe for many years already. So this is all part of our original design of our product. It is available. If it's position monitoring, if it's glass breakage sensors, if it's burglary protection, or also integrated into the home security system, that's all part of what we can offer with our system.
Wow, that's really impressive.
It's interesting to me that there's all this technology and depth to the system, but you don't see any of it. You just see one tiny vertical line, and you might not expect that something that looks that way has all these features and capabilities.
It's the beauty of it.
I was wondering about the good old bug screen. Not that, it is an attractive thing, but depending on which climate you are located in, that might be a feature that clients, would be requesting. I think you guys offer those as well. Am I correct?
Yes, we do. A lot of people, are what am I trying to say? They're visual people. So we did a fine job in how do I say, in concealing and integrating our insect screen. You could see how the running gears are placed, stuff like that. So it's a different type of unique insect screen where it can be concealed, but when it is in use, it's not very intimidating. It's not very ugly. Is that a good way of saying it?
Yeah.
The way that we do it is, we have this spare track usually on every system where we integrate this insect screen in the jam, and so it is invisible if you don't need it, and you can open it up to 1 meter, and again it's frameless, and it attaches perfectly to the handle profile. And with that, you can have a perfect opening for going in and out or for ventilation. And if you don't need it, you don't see it. You don't have to add kind of a bulky other third-party system just to have an insect protection.
That's pretty great.
Which is to the frameless design of the entire product.
Yeah. If you had to install an additional bug screen on top of your beautiful frames, then that would just ruin the whole thing.
Oh, that gives me the heebie-jeebies.
I know.
Don't do that.
No, don't do that.
Going back a little bit to the installation and the tolerances and the amount of deflection that is kind of permitted at the header, so above the windows and doors. As an architect, I'm curious. So how much deflection, how much wiggle room do we have above at the top of the system? Is it like a half inch per X amount of linear feet, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I'll start here. So the wiggle room up top is 3/4 of an inch,
okay,
which allows for the deflection. Either side, I might have mentioned this before, you have about 1/2 inch on each side for the gems. that comes into play, the 3/4 of an inch up top, just like you said, with the deflection, house is settling, stuff like that. Some of the projects that we're on, they go on for quite a while sometimes into the multiple years.
Mm-hmm.
So during that time, obviously, you're going to get the deflection, and our system allows for that without much trouble.
When is the best time in the process for you guys to start manufacturing the product that's going to be installed? In other words, do you want dimensions after rough framing happens? Do you want dimensions before then?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think the earlier the better. What we tend to do here in the States is, we get as much info as possible. We produce our first set of shop drawings, and then we go visit the site and spend some time with the customer to get a feel for the site. So the earlier the better.
Gotcha.
The earlier the better, and we could make adjustments, give recommendations, things of that nature. Let them know, other than the fine print, what to expect from our system, what kind of play they have there.
And then we go back right to the job site when the rough opening is kind of completed, and then we take measurements, and that's kind of when we pull the trigger for production. So
Gotcha.
to ensure that the goods are kind of meeting the site conditions,
Right.
because planning is perfect, but but to control and to take measurements on the rough openings is always the safer way to ensure that we don't have to shoot a second set of profiles that meet the rough openings.
Yeah.
Everyone on the call knows what 1/8 of an inch could do, if it's off. So we want to be as tight as possible.
What you're saying makes sense. There's always a huge, well, not huge, but there always is a discrepancy between what's drawn and what's initially built, and then when you get to rough framing. And anyone who's in this business knows that. I think, actually, maybe some builders might not quite appreciate it or understand the significance of that in contemporary structures. And I think for clients also, it's not something they quite understand. But I think that also it's why having you guys involved or any of the other consultants involved earlier is helpful. So we can at least, that's how we like to work, at least, to touch base with people every now and then. And even if I touch base with you guys or someone else and you say, yeah, there's no feedback, I'd rather have that take place than me saying, it's probably okay if we just don't talk to them for 2 years and then, oh, by the way, now we have this thing, as you said earlier, can you come out and solve it for me?
Right. When it's too late already, yes.
And that happens, right? So many times. So so often we were lucky or glad that we got back to the job site, took the actual measurements, and then started with production, because you don't want to wait for another 24 weeks until the right goods arrive on the job site if we relied on drawings rather than on actual rough openings and stuff.
I'm also wondering, from your guys' side, the most common challenges you have working with architects and contractors. It's not to disparage them, it's more to say, what can we do on our side of the table to have this whole thing be more efficient and productive? Is it that is the challenge mostly that people underestimate the tolerances and then also having you guys involved, or is it something else?
From what I see is it's so fast paced on most of these job sites. You get a contractor who's great on every job site, that all of them know what the heck they're doing. But sometimes they don't want to think about the devil in the details until down the line. And that's where we come in, and that's our job, is to really inform them. You got aluminum going in on every job site, right? But our aluminum, our product, our application is unique. So it is on us. It is on us to preach, to teach, to constantly follow up, to make sure that they understand what we're saying. A lot of the time it's go, 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 go. We'll deal with you in 6 months when we get to that phase.
Right.
But we got to make sure that they understand, that they know what they're looking at. And we have nothing but good people out here. So it's worked out so far, but yeah, you run across a couple of those along the way.
Yeah, actually, yeah, absolutely. I think, and I mentioned it earlier, underestimating the tolerances is definitely one of the biggest challenges, especially when when a company works for the first time with this kind of product.
Gotcha. And then another important question is, how does Skyframe compare to other products in terms of pricing? Because we've talked about quality a lot. We've talked about, the hands-on approach and the benefits. And anyone who's thinking about the product is maybe thinking, well, is this going to cost as much as a Swiss watch? In that sense.
It's definitely not that bad. No. I mean, look, I think there are so many factors that are relevant for the pricing of the kind of product. But first and foremost, it's a very conscious decision that a client makes in terms of how important is quality to me, how important is the longevity of a product. Does the engineering, the performance work? When let's, for example, assume you build a house in Aspen and you want to have this frameless sliding door in there. You're not going to be happy if you're going to have condensation or even ice on the inside when it's installed, right? So if you want to have like a good feeling, if you want to be sure that the product kind of delivers what we promise, then yeah, you're going to probably spend a little bit more money on it. But it's, I think, on the long run, it's worthwhile. It's worth to spend a little bit more.
Yeah, just to piggyback off Angelo, we just limit our third-party involvement. We limit all that. We control everything, so we make sure the customer is receiving top-notch products.
Was that a kind way of not talking about prices?
It's a good way to answer the question without answering the question.
No, but we're I'm thinking about some other companies, but your guys' prices are they're not like double everyone else's. That's not the case. So anyone who's in this space, if they're thinking of using you guys, and you look you guys up and talk to you folks, it's not astronomical. It's definitely on par. And yeah, for competitors at your level, obviously there are ones that are lower. That's a different tier. That's a different tier altogether. But if within your space, yeah.
I keep saying that our product is still way too cheap for what it actually offers, but people don't want to listen to me on that one. And now to be a little bit more specific, if you compare it to a very traditional, a very conventional system, yes, then which is probably of plastics or just a regular aluminum or timber clad window, yeah, then we might be double the price of that. But again, it's not astronomical in terms of the design windows and frameless sliding doors that are out there.
Yeah. Well said. Going back to one hyper-specific question, which I might have glossed over, is we were talking about the tracks, and you had mentioned kind of the width, if there's 2 tracks and then 4 tracks and et cetera. Is there a limitation to the number of tracks, and then therefore, I guess, the total span of the glazing, or is that just to do with the structure of the size of the beam above it,
We have, so we go all the way from 2 to 6 tracks. That's what we say is in our standard range. If there are, bigger spans that we have to respond to, then this is a very project-specific solution. And again, that's where we look into the design. That's where we share our recommendations with the architect in the design phase. And we check together with our R&D department back here in Switzerland if the system can be adapted to this project-specific requirements. So standard is 2 to 6 tracks, and from there, our R&D department is looking into it and basically either provides a solution or makes recommendation how with options. This is again back to what I said earlier. If we feel comfortable, then we're going to provide it. We're going to manufacture. We're going to design it. If we don't feel comfortable out of whatever reasons, we share our concerns and we offer options to the original design. And then it's the architect's and the builder's decision, and probably the homeowner's decision, if they want to, accept that feedback or not.
And pay for a beam that's like 3 feet deep to support a span. Do you guys do custom powder coating colors, or are there presets?
Yeah, we do custom powder coating. We have your your typical like seven or so colors, flavors, however you want to say it. So there's 2 finishes of anodizing, clear anodize, champagne, bronze. You even go into the middle with like your dark bronze and your blacks. Pretty much that's exclusive for everybody. But since we do have our own powder coating in house, we can color match if we get a product code. We could do things like that. With the powder coating in house, we use our IGPs and our RAL color fan, RAL, excuse me. So there's endless options. White to black.
Someone could do red if they wanted to. I mean, I don't know why you do red. I think the point is for the frames to disappear, but you could do red.
Seriously,
all of the colors of the rainbow. Yeah. All of the colors of the rainbow. Yeah.
I just recently saw a profile downstairs on the production line with an orange finish, and it was a first for me. We saw a lot of interesting stuff down there, but orange, that was quite, and it was really like this, alarming orange.
That's cool.
I'm very curious to see that installed. I'm sure it's going to look fine though, but it was something different.
Maybe it was for the birds so they don't fly into the
I don't think so.
What?
I don't think so.
Like that. I like that new color Angelo came up with. It's alarming orange.
Alarming orange. Yeah.
That's for the lack of my English. I apologize. Sometimes I'm using funny words in English.
No, it's a good description. Actually, it's very vibrant.
A great description. Yeah.
One of the final questions for me is, what is the most challenging part of creating of Skyframe for you? Is it I don't know, is it growth? Is it maintaining relationships with material fabric manufacturers? Is it finding new ones? Is it product innovation?
I can speak to that, I think. So right now, one of the biggest challenges that we see is really finding the right people, the right staff. We're lucky enough that we can grow, and growth means you need more people in production, in product management, in the R&D department, and finding these people is a pretty difficult thing. I think that in general, but definitely in such a small country as Switzerland, this is one challenge. Then another challenge is what you just mentioned. We always believed in strong relationships with our suppliers. Very early in the design phase of a new product, we take them by the hands and we work together on a solution that doesn't exist yet. The pivot point is a good example that I mentioned earlier. But finding these suppliers that are willing to have the same approach to quality, to efficiency, because that's where efficiency starts, right? It starts with the supplier getting the goods to the factory, and from here to the job site. That's all part of a very efficient production and system. That's the most challenging part. We keep pushing the envelope. That means we have to build up more relationships with suppliers, and there are not many out there. Glass, there are probably 3 glass suppliers in Europe that could provide the quality of glass that we require for our system. There is one in Northern America, for example, up in Canada. So that's the challenges. Same comes to aluminum, to insulation bars, to electronic components. That's the 2 biggest challenges. The growth, that is something that we learned. The internationalization of this small Swiss company, that's something that we learned over here, and we feel pretty comfortable in building up new markets. But the other 2 things, that's the biggest challenge for us right now.
That's very fascinating to hear, because on the glass manufacturer specifically, or the aluminum, you're really only talking about literally a handful, like just a few. That's not many at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was wondering if maybe there is like a new product or something you guys are working on that maybe you can't tell us everything about, but maybe just a few words, or
what's next,
or what's next
more broadly, if you can't disclose new product.
I don't want to get you into trouble, but
I'll leave that one to Angelo.
Yeah. So actually, there's one product that we're just about to release to the market. Is probably not a completely new product, but it's definitely a cool update, and is motorization for the pivot door. And that again is we have a different approach than many of the other players on the market. the motorization is intended not to be in commercial use, but it is also catering kind of to the residential market and everything that comes with it. So again, we worked with a supplier who is a very popular manufacturer of this kind of door automation. We developed a more for the pivot door. That's one thing. And I think it's going to be quite a big thing for the US market, because it's first and foremost the American who would require this kind of doors with these sizes that should be motorized.
Yeah, yes, this is true.
But pivot doors in the meanwhile are pretty popular in Switzerland and Europe too. And that's California kind of influencing the developments back here in Europe. So we're going to use the pivot door here in Europe first and foremost for entry doors. Mm-hmm. That's the big difference. So that is one product. And another product that's going to be for a certain niche going to be kind of groundbreaking is that we can have frameless sliding doors with switch glass in it. So you can have that as for shading or for privacy, but not indoors, but outdoors for facades. And that brings its own challenges with the power supply and so forth. Mm-hmm. So that's the two next things that we're gonna introduce to the market pretty soon.
And the switch glass is the one that changes tint and opacity by electrical current, essentially.
And that we're very early in that. That's something that is not very popular right now. We developed a product together with one of the US big tech firms for the new headquarters, and with everything that we learned during this development process, we kind of are to now introduce that into a serial product. So that's another example for what I explained earlier. There was a project-specific solution that we had to develop, and which is now getting to be a part of our standard product range.
That's great.
That would be pretty awesome, because then that means you don't need to have, those shade device hidden at the top and all of that nonsense. You could have bathrooms that are really open to the outside, but when it's time to take your shower, you could just switch it up, which it's pretty amazing. I'm very excited about this one.
We're going to be configuring one of those in the next 2 weeks out in Los Angeles.
Wow. Oh, cool.
So we're looking forward to it. Yeah.
And actually, the final thing is where you guys do most of your work, or where your products use most of the cases. And then, Richard, I was wondering if you could talk about the LA showroom you guys have and the presence in LA, because we're in LA and we have a lot of network there, and a lot of architects who are wondering what kind of resources they have with Skyframe in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so you're going to see your standard Skyframe in all high-end residentials throughout the LA County, up towards Santa Barbara, stuff like that, along the beach side. Here in Culver City, in the showroom, which I'm at right now, we have several different, you have Skyframe 2, 3, Classic, Plain. We have them all here for you or any client to come take a look at, architects. What we do offer, and what we do a couple times per week, is we have a couple walkthroughs with end users. We discuss our history. We show them some literature. We let them touch the system, which is a big selling point to see that a big Skyframe 3 can be open, pretty easily. It's pretty intimidating when you're looking at it at first. I'm thinking there's no way I could pull that thing. You get someone who's a little bit on the elderly side, and they're like, there's no way. You show them how to do it, and they're able to do it. So that impresses them a lot. Coming later this year, we're also going to have a little training facility here as well. We're going to work with our partners, our local teams here to make sure we're on the up and up, and little refresher courses along the way never hurt anybody, right? So we have a lot to offer coming from this facility, and hope to see you guys, at one point or another.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Culver City. We'll go to the father's office to get burgers afterwards.
There you go.
Or before.
Yeah,
or before and after.
Too sleepy.
Before and after.
Then, Angelo, it's if you could just talk broadly about where Skyframe is the most used. I would imagine California, Southern California, even Northern California is super popular
Yeah, speaking from a probably global perspective
Yeah.
first, so Skyframe is we are represented on every continent. So Europe still has the biggest share of what we produce here in our headquarters. But then it's the United States who are kind of that one market with the quickest growth, and which is going to be the biggest market for the future. That's for sure. In the United States, we're represented with distribution partners in every corner of the country. We have again our direct sales and installation business in LA County, Malibu. We have partners up in Montana, in Colorado. We have a very experienced partner in Florida for the hurricane market in the Bahamas. So yeah, that's how we cover the United States. In the United States, the most like the biggest markets, as you already said, is definitely LA, Malibu, but also Long Island, New York, and Florida. That's kind of where you have this very strong clusters of these contemporary homes and architecture.
That's awesome. I think we covered pretty much everything. We covered all the bits and pieces, all the technical stuff, and beyond that. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to come on the show and talk to us and answer all these wacky questions that we had about your product. Super detailed, nuanced things that only architects care about, and hopefully some broader questions that other folks were interested in as well.
Thank you very much for having us. It was very interesting.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail. If you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion, feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.